Hello and welcome to this edition of Takeaway Tuesday, where we're going to be talking about the challenges of transitioning between the pre-substantive phase of the interview and the substantive phase of the interview. There was a prior 2019 Takeaway Tuesday that looked at the differences between the question, "What did you come here to talk about today?" versus "Why did you come here today?" or "Do you know what you came here to talk about today?" And that research was very clear that the best transition question is, "What did you come here to talk about today?" because that drives the child to talk about experiences, whereas the "Why did you come here today?" or "Do you know what you came to talk about today?" are yes/no questions. They're unproductive, and the research shows that when interviewers use either the why question or do you know question, that the productivity of the transition prompt dropped about 60%. So that tells us that the what is much more productive. What we're going to be talking about, though, today is you've asked that great transition question, "What did you come here to talk about today?" And the child does not give you an informative response. In other words, they might give you some information, they might not, but it's really not the information that has to do with the reason that you're conducting the interview. So it's uninformative. What we do know when we have these uninformative responses that interviewers tend to do several things. And some of the next steps, I should say, can either be what we consider a high quality or a low quality step. And we really want to stay on the side of the high quality. So let's think about this. You've asked that first transition prompt. Child doesn't give you an informative response. What do? Oftentimes, we may come back and say, "What did your caretaker, mom and dad, whoever brought the child to the interview, what did that person say to you about coming?" And then dependent again on what the child says, if it's an informative response, well, they said, "I'm here to talk about Uncle Joe." Then we would say, "Talk to me about your Uncle Joe." So we're just following the child and asking for additional information. Sometimes what we do, though, is if they're somewhat non-informative, "Well, they said I was going to talk to a nice person." "Talk to me about your mom telling you were going to talk to a nice person." So we're taking their information, even though it's really not informative, but we're going to just base our response on what the child has laid on the table. And that might then move them to making a disclosure. But let's say, again, we get nothing. Then we might drop down further in the funnel. And we want to think about transition as a funnel where we start open with that what question, and then we start to narrow our focus. So we've started with what, we've dropped down and asked about what they were told about coming, and if that elicited a response, then we're good to move forward to the substantive phase. But if not, we try to follow, "Well, tell me about your mom saying you were going to talk to a nice person." And our hope again is that that moves us to the substantive phase of the interview. But let's say it doesn't. Where do we go next? What we could do is say, have there been some worries or concerns? And again, that is a yes/no question. But if the child says yes, then we could say, "Talk to me about some worries or concerns." And again, hopefully that moves us to the substantive phase. What we often see is eventually that we start to narrow the quality of the prompts that we ask. And toward the end or the bottom of that transition funnel, we start to see an introduction of information. What I will say, that introducing information into an interview is always case-specific and jurisdictionally determined. It should never be done without the benefit of having a conversation with your team and or prosecutors. There are some jurisdictions in the United States where it is not allowed or it's considered inappropriate to introduce any information. Other information can be introduced, but it's done in such a way that it would be considered leading or suggestive. So we have to think really hard about what would we introduce and how would we introduce it. So if we choose, and again, at the bequest of our team, to introduce information, we would introduce information if we considered it high quality. So if I have a report from a school resource officer and that child has made a disclosure to that resource officer, I'm going to feel confident in saying, you talked to a school resource officer yesterday. And then again, depending on how the child responds, if they say, yeah, I'm going to say, talk to me about talking with the school resource officer. Or if they talk to a parent or a counselor, then I might make that decision about, can I introduce it? Now, we do have to think about the quality. If you have parents that unfortunately are going through a custody issue, divorce, and maybe there's been allegations kind of back and forth on each side, we might choose not to introduce information from one of those parents because we're not sure about the quality of that information. So before you introduce something into the interview, if it's information, you want to look at and have a discussion with your team, what's considered the quality of the information. Now, let's say that you have chat logs, notes, medical reports, all these different other types of information. Then it will be up to you and your team. Do you introduce just the information? Do you introduce actual physical evidence? And that is really not what we're going to be talking about today. We're talking about the introduction of information, and you want to make sure that it's high quality. So as we transition from the pre-substantive phase to the substantive phase, we want you to think of it as a funnel. We want you to always start with a what did you come here to talk about today? And then maybe if that doesn't work, go to another transition prompt or two. And then if you have to go all the way to the bottom and you're introducing information, one, make sure it's not suggestive or leading. And two, make sure that it's high quality and you have the okay from your team and your prosecutor. Thanks for watching. If you'd like more information, please check out calio.org. Also look at the NCAC Virtual Training Center for different webinars and seminars that have been recorded with experts in the field. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please email me at the link below. Thanks and have a great day.